Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop, and today we are making lipping rulers. These ruler kits from Reed Plains come with two different brass end caps, and then they also come with a set of pins, and you can get them in either the wide version or the narrow version. I'm making one of each, and I'm kind of experimenting with different setups on it. You'll see as we go through. But first thing I need to do is rip these down to the right thickness, and so I grabbed a piece of wood that I can actually rip down and make two of them out of, and then we can start resawing. Everybody's favorite process. Yes, resawing is one of those things that scares a lot of people, but honestly, if you give it a try and be willing to experiment a little bit, and as long as you are always flipping it, I have it as an angle away from me so it makes it easier to cut, and I'm only cutting on the top and on the side towards me. Once I get down a little ways, I rotate the board so that I'm cutting the other side, and you kind of go back and forth. This particular one had a lot of tension in the middle, and so both those boards bent out, meaning that my rulers are now bent. But yeah, it's okay. These are kind of experimental pieces that I'm playing around with, and if I were going to make some nice ones for the long term, I'd get something a little bit straighter and cleaner. First thing I want to do is mark out the ends, because we need to make a mortise that fits into the brass, so I can use the actual brass pieces to set up the marking gauges and mark off of one face. That face is my reference face. And then we can cut down a little ways on the shoulders, and then we can chisel out on the cheeks. Now, I'm playing with each of these a little differently, and each one of the two rulers I'm doing slightly differently. One of these I'm going to be chopping out the cheeks of the tenon, and the other one I'm actually going to saw them out and kind of experiment back and forth. Usually I prefer to chop out the shoulder and the cheek on these, as they're relatively thin and they go pretty easily. You can see how it is the same thickness as the side of the brass end. We're going to do the same thing on the other side, clean up the corners, and then we can make sure that the brass fits and slides down on there. You can see how there's 3 holes in the ends of this, and we need to put the pins through. And this is where things can get a little bit tricky, because the brass holes are not the actual size. They're cast, so they give you a close representation of where they should be, but we need to work those out a little bit more. You can see on the larger side, I decided to saw them out, and that worked out really well. Actually, was kind of fun, but it takes a little more skill, especially with those thin little pieces. It's very easy for them to flop around, so often chiseling them out will be a little easier. I do recommend using a drill press for this. You want to make sure that these are 90 degrees, but if you're really careful with a drill, you can do that as well. I'm going to start by making one pin, and I'm going to put it a little ways into the center hole. This center hole will be nice and tight, but the holes on the outside need to have some slop. So we're going to drill out the rest of the holes once the center pin has been located. That way we can make sure all the holes are in the correct location. Once that's been done, we can take the pin out, pull the piece off, and we can wallow out those holes so that they can slide on the outside, but not in the middle one. The middle one's solid, and that way the wood can still expand and contract inside. Then we can drive in the pins, and then we can peen them all over and lock this thing in place. So we're driving them in until they're just sticking out either side by a little less than a 16th inch. Doesn't need to be much. And I found it easier to use the full rod, drive it in, cut it off, drive it in, cut it off, drive it in, cut it off, so you always had that little extra on there, and you could put them just where you want. We'll use an anvil on the other side, or in this case a 1, 2, 3 block, and I'm going to use a punch to broaden out the heads and spread out the top. And then we can come in with the peening hammer and actually peen them. This spreads out the top and crushes it into the brass so that you get a nice tight fit and the pin will never come out in the future. We're going to do it to both sides, and then come in and file them all down and smooth. The brass castings are cast, and so if you have a belt sander or something like that, it makes it really fast to smooth all those down, but with a good rasp and file, they go off pretty quickly. This one I actually left the board thicker in both dimensions, and then came back and planed it down to the brass, and then did the final touches with the rasp and file to detail off all the corners and get rid of sharp edges, and you can see how there's a little bit of a rough on there. I also want to, on this one, do some layout and marking. Now in the future, Jeff is going to offer a roller that will impress the measurements into the head and do a really cool job of that. But you can't always come in with a knife and mark out all the marks. And it takes a little while. But this is a fun kind of zen out moment to make sure that everything is the way you want and have a little bit of fun. For the other ruler, we're going to be using the narrow version, but in this case, I want one edge of the ruler to come down at a 45 degree rather than being flat on the side. This will give me a space that I can put on a measuring tape or I can use it as a very accurate story stick, in which case I can put marks on there and wipe it off. And I really like having the idea of a story stick that you can change over time and erase and use again another one. And this is just kind of a fun experiment, and I want to play around with that. You can see on this end, it's actually going to be a stopped rabbit or stopped philister on here. And on this one, I'm not going to do any sawing. It's all going to be chiseling them out. And so I'll chisel down at the shoulder and then pare in from the end and chisel down at the shoulder and pare in from the end. You can see how the end thing goes on. And there's extra on the side. That is what I'm going to pare down into a 45 degree. Then we can go back into what we did before and drill them out and then drive in the rods, cut off the rods to the right length, make sure the holes on the outside are wallowed in the wood so that there's a little bit of movement on there, and well, the exact same thing we did before. And I do like to round over one edge of the pin just a little bit to make it easier to slide in. The measurements on these are set up so that they're very, very tight in the brass, and you want them to kind of squeeze in and crush over things. So we can take it back over the drill out the other holes now that the first one is located, and then we can come back through and wallow the holes and make sure everything is ready for sliding on the brass itself. Get the brass on there, drive them down in, mushroom them out, peen them over. Second verse, same as the first. And this, surprisingly, this is a really, really fun step. I don't know why. I just like taking my anger out on it and bashing things in. But it is a lot of fun, and I did enjoy doing this. And then, of course, file and file and file and file and make everything smooth and pretty. And this is one of those steps where you can make things really pretty and shine up the bronze and make it really special, or you can just go enough to make it flat. And I decided to go the route of making enough to make it flat, and because that's all it really needs to be functional, and I kind of like seeing the history of the tool. I'm going to come in with a scrub plane and knock down the majority of the corner. I have a marking gauge mark on there that comes down the same length as the stick is thick, and if you just make those 2 points connected together, you get a 45 degree. Then I'm going to come in with a joiner and smooth out the transition and all the marks left over from the scrub plane, and then I can come in with the smoothing plane and do the last little detail until I get that on there. I'll leave a link in the description down below to this tape as well. It's relatively affordable, and you can even buy packs of it that you can stick on there, and you can write on it with a pencil and then wipe it off. It actually works out really, really well, as it has all the measurements, as long as you start it at the right point. I have it started to the inside of the lip because it's designed to hook onto that. You could start it from the other end or wherever you want it to be, but you can see how you can write on it, and then you can wipe it off, and just like that, you've ready for the next project, and it works out really well. I've been very impressed with it. We're going to be applying some boiled linseed oil, and then let it soak on, let that dry out, and then apply some paste wax, and that's really all these need. I love the boiled linseed oil and paste wax finish for all these hand tools. A really fun project. I really enjoyed this one. This is one of those things that just was a good time in the shop, and now I've got a tool that I can use for years and years to come, and I'm looking forward to it. This is a lot of fun. Thanks, Jeff, for another great project. This was a fun one. So there you have it. This is the newest product from Reed Tools. And when Jeff first contacted me about this, like, I really don't use rulers. I don't measure things in my shop. I use reality to mark things off. But I do use story sticks, where I'll have a stick for a project that has the lengths of legs and things like that. And I thought, this would be kind of interesting to have a story stick that I can either measure off of the butt end, or I can measure off of the lip, and I can make marks on the ruler face. And then when I'm done, I can wipe them off, and I can have the story stick again for the next project. And I thought that's kind of an interesting idea. Not to mention, I found this to be an incredibly fun project, and there are so many different things you could do with the inlay and other additions to it. This could be really kind of fun. Jeff is also making a roller so that you can actually imprint measurement into the ruler if you want to. That'll be coming out in the future. It may be something that is actually rented rather than purchased so that you can mark into your rulers. And that's kind of interesting. But I honestly had a lot of fun. I am looking forward to using these a lot more. And it's a different project that I didn't think I would like, but I do. I really enjoyed this. This is a fun one. So if you'd like to find out more about these, there are links to them, where, down below, description, doobly-doo. But if you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, snide remarks, throw those down below. I do love reading through those, and I answer as many of those as I can get to. Thank you. I really do, and it means a lot because it helps the channel grow. Anytime you even put a snide comment down there, thank you. Or you could just put CBD, comment down below. Thank you. But if you want to go even farther, all of these names over here, those are patrons on Patreon. And between patrons and members, you guys are the ones who keep us going. You sponsor this channel, and I get to say what I want to say and work with weird things that I like to work with. So if you like that and think about becoming a patron, there's links to that down below. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Why is it these things always remind me of my kids? Hey, don't give me no lip!